It was the kind of night that tried to pretend nothing bad ever happened here. Tree-lined sidewalks, American flags hanging still on polished porches, motion sensor lights that blinked lazily over manicured hedges. The air was crisp, too clean, like a lie scrubbed spotless. Danielle Monroe drove slowly through the neighborhood, her Lexus gliding beneath the soft glow of street lamps. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover, poised, confident, untouchable. Her navy blue gown shimmered slightly as she shifted in her seat. A string of pearls hugged her neck. The scent of expensive perfume lingered in the cabin. The fundraiser had gone well. She'd raised nearly 50 grand for the youth center. She'd made them laugh. She'd made them cry. She'd made them believe change was possible. And now she just wanted to go home. The silence in the car was comforting. No music. Just the gentle hum of the road and the afterglow of purpose until wee-oh, wee-oh. The sirens split the night like a scream. Danielle's eyes snapped to the rearview mirror. Red and blue lights erupted behind her, flashing like accusations. Her breath caught. Her heartbeat stumbled, then ran. No. Not tonight. She checked her speed. 27 in a 30. No rolling stop, no signal missed. Her registration was valid. Her taillights worked. There was nothing. She pulled over with robotic precision. Signal on. The car is parked. Hands on the wheel, visible. Out of instinct, out of fear, out of history. The patrol car stopped inches from her bumper. She could see his silhouette through the headlights. Still. Watching, measuring. She whispered to herself, "You did nothing wrong. You're not a threat. You are Danielle Monroe, chair of the Asheville Youth Coalition and the wife of the city's new police chief." But she knew none of that had ever stopped a bullet. The officer stepped out. His boots hit the pavement like punctuation marks in a warning. 1, 2, 3. His hand hovered near his holster. Danielle kept still, not frozen in fear, frozen in calculation. The man's face came into view. Square jaw, tight lips. Blank expression, not hostile, worse, indifferent. "License and registration," he barked. She nodded slowly, voice steady. "I'm reaching for my bag now." "Just my ID." She handed it over. He didn't thank her, didn't explain. Just stared at the documents, then back at her. "We got a report," he said. "Vehicle matching this description." "Suspicious activity." Danielle's brow furrowed. "I just left a charity event, downtown." "You can call the mayor if you need to verify." He didn't answer. His mind had left the conversation before she even began it. Step out of the vehicle. There it was. The shift, the moment where everything changes. Danielle inhaled once. Deep, controlled, then reached for the door handle. No sudden moves, no raised voice, no resistance. Only one thought pulsed in her chest now. He doesn't know who I am, but he's about to find out. Danielle Monroe had always known how to hold herself together, even when the world tried to come apart around her. From the boardrooms of city council meetings to the corridors of juvenile detention centers where she mentored troubled girls, Danielle had learned early that composure wasn't just an advantage, it was armor. And tonight, she needed all of it. The officer was still outside, circling her Lexus like a vulture. His flashlight beam darted over her tires, her license plate, her hand still resting obediently on the wheel. Danielle's jaw was tight, but her breath came evenly. No trembling. No panic. Only 1,000 calculations running through her mind. This wasn't new. Not for her. Not for any black woman with a decent car and a straight spine. She thought of what her husband always told her before leaving for work, even before he wore the stars on his collar. If they pull you over, baby, don't flinch, don't argue, keep your hands visible. Don't give them an excuse to say they were scared. And if things go sideways, demand your right to call me. Demand it. Now he was Chief Robert Monroe, the highest-ranking officer in the Asheville Police Department. The first black chief the city had ever had. A man who had spent his entire career trying to clean rot out of a structure that pretended it didn't smell. But title or not, Danielle knew. Some badges don't see wives. They only see skin. She had seen it before. At events. On sidewalks. In stairs that lasted one beat too long. In elevators that went silent the moment she stepped inside. And now, on the side of this quiet, tree-lined street, she was seeing it again. The officer was speaking into his radio. His body language had changed, stiffer now. He was escalating. She could feel it in the air, thick and metallic, something primal. Danielle didn't move. She focused on her reflection in the mirror, on the woman who had just been honored for her work with underprivileged youth. The woman who had built her career on advocacy, reform, and grace under fire. The woman is now being treated like a criminal for simply existing in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong color of skin. Don't speak first, she reminded herself. Let them make the move. Let them make the mistake. And still, beneath her polished surface, another voice rose. A memory. Her mother's voice this time was not calm, not measured, but tired. Baby, when they see us, they don't see women. They see threats. They don't care what degrees we have or what charity we give to. They see a target they think no one will defend. But Danielle wasn't defenseless. Not tonight. Her husband was just 10 minutes away, and if they kept pushing, if they dared cross the line, he would come. The officer returned, now flanked by a second cop. His partner was younger, maybe mid-20s, and far less confident. The kind that followed orders but never questioned them. The kind that watched injustice and told himself it was procedure. The first cop spoke again. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Danielle didn't move. "I'd like to call my husband," she said, her voice even, unyielding. "He's the chief of police." The men paused. Then laughed, quiet, mocking. The younger one smirked. "Right. And I'm the governor." The senior officer's face hardened. "Out! Now!" Danielle looked down at her lap for just a second. Then, slowly, gracefully, she opened the car door. As she stepped out, the night air kissed her shoulders. She straightened to her full height, not as a threat, but as a woman who refused to be made small. Her heels clicked against the pavement. She didn't run, didn't plead. She simply stood still, silent, unwavering. The world may not have recognized her value, but soon enough, they would recognize her name. The air felt different now, thicker, slower, as if the night itself were holding its breath. Officer Chad Wallace stepped forward, the gravel beneath his boots grinding like a warning. His build was average, but his posture was weaponized. Straight shoulders, chin high, one hand resting on the butt of his holstered gun, the other gripping a flashlight like it had something to prove. He didn't look at Danielle Monroe as a person. He looked at her the way a locksmith looks at a door. Just another object to unlock, disassemble, and search. He shined the light directly in her face. "Step out of the vehicle." Danielle blinked against the glare but didn't flinch. "Is there a reason I'm being asked to exit my car?" Wallace didn't answer at first. He just walked a slow arc around her front bumper like a predator circling prey that hadn't run yet. "We received a report," he finally said. "Vehicle matching this make, model, and color, involved in suspicious activity." His voice was flat, emotionless, like he'd repeated the line so many times it had stopped meaning anything. Danielle's eyes narrowed. "Suspicious how?" He didn't elaborate, just shrugged like the details didn't matter because they didn't, not to him. Danielle knew what this was. She had lived through it before. The words were always vague, matches a description, seemed out of place, acted nervously. The kind of language that stretched just enough to justify anything and said just enough to mean nothing. "I've just come from a charity gala," she said, her tone controlled. "At the Asheville Civic Center. There were hundreds of people there." "You can confirm it. There's absolutely no reason to suspect me or this vehicle." But Wallace wasn't listening. He wasn't even pretending to. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. Now." Her spine straightened. Her fingers itched to reach for her phone, but she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she slowly opened the door and stepped out with dignity, sharp enough to cut the tension. 2 more squad cars pulled up behind Wallace's. The cavalry had arrived. 2 officers exited the second vehicle. One was tall and stiff, the other lean with restless hands. Neither introduced themselves. They didn't have to. Their presence said everything. Danielle's stomach turned, not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't about protocol, this was about dominance. Wallace nodded to the others. "We're going to conduct a vehicle search." Danielle blinked. "Without a warrant? Without consent?" "Routine check," one of them muttered, already moving toward the passenger door. "There's nothing routine about this," Danielle said, louder this time. "You don't have probable cause. I haven't consented." But they were already opening the doors. One officer rummaged through the glove compartment. Another yanked open her designer handbag, spilling its contents across the hood. Lipstick rolled. A set of keys clattered. A flyer with her face on it, the same flyer from the fundraiser, fluttered in the breeze and landed at Wallace's feet. He picked it up and studied it like a foreign language. "Danielle Monroe," he read aloud. "Chairwoman, Youth Coalition." He didn't say it with respect. He said it with disbelief, like her resume had insulted him. Danielle stared him down. "You're violating my rights." Wallace smirked and handed the flyer to one of his officers. "Guess they'll let anyone run these nonprofits now, huh?" The line landed like a slap. Danielle's face didn't change, but something behind her eyes hardened. She reached into her coat pocket slowly, deliberately, and pulled out her phone. One of the officers tensed, hand moving toward his belt. But Danielle didn't care anymore. She dialed. 1 ring, 2. Then a voice, calm, deep, and unmistakably in charge. "Robert Monroe." Her voice was quiet but fierce. "Robert, I'm on Sycamore Lane. They've pulled me over. They're searching the car. No warrant. No explanation. I need you here, now." There was a pause. The kind of pause that says everything. Then, "Stay calm. I'm on my way." As she lowered the phone, Wallace leaned in, eyes gleaming with smugness. "Who exactly do you think you're calling?" Danielle met his stare without blinking. "The man who's about to make this your worst decision of the year." The phone call lasted exactly 12 seconds, long enough for Danielle Monroe to deliver the message. Short enough to avoid provoking the wrong reaction. "I got pulled over," she said into the receiver, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet. "They're searching my car for no reason. I need you. Now." There was no panic in her tone, no desperation. Just precision. Just a fact. On the other end, Robert Monroe didn't ask for clarification. Didn't fumble with questions. Didn't ask if she was sure. He just answered with the weight of someone who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. "I'm coming." Then, silence. Danielle tucked the phone back into her coat pocket, her movements slow and exact. She turned her gaze to Officer Wallace, who was now rifling through her purse on the hood of the Lexus like a bored TSA agent on a power trip. Lip gloss, a folded napkin, a pen engraved with the Youth Coalition logo. And finally, a neatly stapled packet of documents, still faintly warm from the copier at the Civic Center. Wallace lifted it between two fingers as if it were radioactive. "What's this?" he asked, his voice dipped in mockery. "Revolutionary propaganda?" Danielle didn't answer. She didn't need to, because her silence was louder than anything she could have said. "These flyers look awfully organized," he continued, flipping through the pages with fake curiosity. "Gotta admit, it takes real nerve to host a charity event before committing criminal activity. Very bold." The other officers chuckled. It was the kind of laughter that didn't reach the eyes, the kind used to fill the space where reason used to be. Still, Danielle said nothing. She just stared at Wallace, not with fear, not with fury. With something far more dangerous, knowing. The look unsettled him more than any outburst would have. He shifted slightly, suddenly aware of how exposed he felt under the street lamp's cold white glow. "You're awfully quiet," he muttered. Danielle cocked her head slightly. "Would it matter if I wasn't?" The smirk on Wallace's face faltered. He closed the folder and slammed it onto the hood harder than necessary. Another officer approached with her car registration, pretending to verify information they already knew wasn't missing. It was a theater, all of it. A stage play of authority for an audience they thought couldn't fight back. But Danielle wasn't in the audience. She was the reckoning. Behind her, she could hear more tires pulling up. More lights flickering into the night. Neighbors were beginning to notice. A curtain moved in a second-story window. A porch light flicked on down the street. And then, softly, deliberately, Danielle spoke again. "I asked earlier," she said. "Why was I stopped? You still haven't answered." Wallace avoided her eyes. Another voice jumped in, the youngest of the trio. "We're doing a precautionary sweep, standard procedure." Danielle turned to him. "Precautionary for what exactly?" He hesitated. She stepped closer, not aggressively, but with the calm certainty of someone whose dignity could not be negotiated. "Let me guess," she said. "You received a vague report. A black woman in a luxury car, alone. Must be something criminal." The officer flinched at the word. Wallace barked back, defensive now. "You're making this more complicated than it has to be." "No," Danielle replied, her tone suddenly sharp. "You already did that when you opened my car without my consent, when you mocked my work. When you ignored my questions, I'm just here, holding up a mirror." The street had grown quieter. The wind had stilled. Even the night seemed to be waiting for what came next. The scene had settled into that dangerous kind of stillness, the one that only arrives after power has been abused, but before consequences begin. Danielle Monroe stood beside her car like a statue carved from steel. Her belongings were still scattered across the hood, her dignity intact but tested. 3 officers loomed nearby, their confidence beginning to crack beneath the weight of something they hadn't prepared for. A woman who didn't beg, didn't flinch, and didn't break. Then came the sound that would change everything. The low, commanding growl of a high-performance engine sliding around the corner of Sycamore Lane. Not fast, not loud, but undeniable. A black SUV rolled up beside the police cruisers like a shadow stepping into the light. It stopped with surgical precision just a few feet from where Danielle stood, and the engine cut off in a single breathless moment. The driver's door opened, and Robert Monroe stepped out. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. He didn't even touch his phone. He didn't need to. His presence spoke before he did. The chief of police for the city of Asheville was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a fitted black suit, the kind that whispered control rather than screamed authority. The evening breeze tugged lightly at his lapel, but nothing about him moved unless he willed it. Pinned to his belt was a gleaming badge that caught the streetlight like the edge of a drawn sword. Officer Chad Wallace turned and froze mid-step, his posture stiffening. His hand instinctively dropped away from his holster. Robert's gaze swept the scene once. The disheveled purse, the car door opened. His wife's expression was calm, but coiled tight. And the three officers, now visibly shrinking under the weight of their own uncertainty. He walked forward, not like a man in a hurry, but like someone who already owned the outcome. And then, in a voice that didn't rise above normal volume but carried like thunder across pavement, he asked, "Why is my wife being treated like a criminal?" No one answered. Because there was no answer. Wallace cleared his throat, his voice suddenly much smaller. "Sir, we received a call about a suspicious vehicle." Robert didn't break stride. What was the probable cause for the search? Another officer stepped in, fumbling. The description matched. "What description?" Robert interrupted. "Be specific." Silence. He stopped directly in front of them, his badge now perfectly aligned with the one on Wallace's chest, but carrying an authority the other man couldn't match. "You had no warrant, no consent. You denied her a phone call. You searched her property based on vague suspicion. You mocked her. You laughed. You violated protocol and civil rights in front of witnesses." He gestured subtly at the growing number of bystanders. Neighbors with phones out, cameras already rolling. The air was thick with the buzz of quiet outrage. Live stream icons glowed blue across screens. The story had already escaped this street. It was becoming everyone's. Robert stepped closer to Wallace until only inches separated them. "You think this is going to disappear?" he asked quietly. Wallace looked down. His hands twitched. Danielle hadn't moved. Her silence now radiated louder than any protest. She wasn't broken. She was building momentum, brick by brick. Word by word. Robert turned to the youngest officer and said flatly, "Radio your supervisor, now." The man didn't hesitate. His fingers scrambled for the mic clipped to his vest. He spoke quickly, voice shaking. A few blocks away, tires screeched. Help was coming, but not for them. Danielle looked up at her husband, not for rescue, but for confirmation. It had begun. The power dynamics had shifted, and this time, the badge wasn't here to protect the system. It was here to expose it. It began, as these things often do, with a single phone held high. No shouting, no chants. Just the quiet click of a record button. A woman across the street, maybe in her 30s, holding a child's hand, lifted her phone and pointed it directly at the scene unfolding. A second man, sitting on his porch with a beer, turned down the volume on his TV and started filming too. Within seconds, phones were everywhere. And then, "You're alive," someone whispered. The words rippled like a shockwave. Across Asheville, dozens of phones lit up with a shaky live stream. What started as a routine traffic stop was now center stage. Comment bubbles flew. Screenshots were taken. The internet, insatiable and merciless, had entered the conversation. Danielle Monroe stood tall in her heels, arms crossed, face unreadable. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was now public. Robert Monroe didn't look at the cameras. He didn't have to. He knew they were there. He felt them, like heat against the back of his neck. Felt the weight of expectation. The system had eyes on it now. He pulled out his phone, not to scroll, but to call. "Lieutenant Denton," he said, voice clipped, precise. "Get to Sycamore Lane, now." Then he hung up. 3 officers stood frozen like statues carved from arrogance and poor judgment. The badge on their chest suddenly felt heavier. The uniforms no longer protected them. They exposed them. Less than 3 minutes later, the sound of spinning tires echoed off the nearby houses. A cruiser screeched to a stop. The door flew open. Lieutenant Carlos Denton stepped out, a tall man in his 50s with silver streaks in his temples and an expression like someone walking into a courtroom where he might be both witness and defendant. He took one look at Robert Monroe and understood. This wasn't an internal matter. This was an exercise of accountability, in public, on camera. "Chief," Denton said, voice measured. Robert didn't waste time. "Lieutenant, you've been briefed?" Denton nodded once. "Then I'll be brief," Robert said, stepping into full view of the phones now trained on him like spotlights. These officers conducted an illegal search, used intimidation, and violated department protocol in the presence of multiple witnesses, including the chief's spouse. He turned, slowly, toward the 3 officers whose faces had begun to drain of color. Their conduct was unprofessional. Their bias was exposed. And their authority is no longer recognized. He paused for only a beat, then said, "Clear and clean. Turn in your badges and weapons. You are suspended immediately." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. The officers didn't move. Denton stepped forward more quietly. "You heard him." Still frozen. Then, one by one, like towers toppling, each man reached for their badge. The metallic sound of pins unclasping hit the pavement louder than gunfire. The clink of sidearms placed gently on the hood of a patrol car echoed like justice taking form. A woman from the crowd clapped once, then again, and then others joined. Not a roar, not yet, but a beginning. Robert turned to Denton. "This won't be handled in-house," he said. "There will be a public inquiry. Civilian oversight, full transparency." "Yes, sir." "Starting tonight." Danielle finally spoke, her voice calm but cutting. "This doesn't end with suspension. It ends when the system learns to fear silence from people like me, because silence isn't weakness. It's the calm before the accountability." The live stream numbers ticked higher, over 42,000 watching. And climbing. Robert looked at the nearest phone, Into America, and delivered the line that would headline every news feed by morning. "If this is what happens to the chief's wife, imagine what they do to your daughters when no one is watching." By sunrise, Asheville was no longer the same. News vans clustered along the sidewalk outside the city's police headquarters. Reporters pressed against barricades. Microphones tilted like sunflowers toward the podium erected hastily in front of the glass-paneled entrance. Inside, the air was taut with anticipation. City staffers whispered, uniformed officers paced behind tinted windows, and the public waited, not just for words, but for something more rare: accountability. At precisely 9:01 a.m., the doors opened. Police Chief Robert Monroe stepped out in full uniform, his hat under one arm, the badge on his chest polished to a mirror shine. No escort, no teleprompter, just him and the weight of what the department had done. Cameras flashed, Shutters clicked. Silence fell. He began without preamble. Last night, officers under my command violated the very oath they swore to uphold. They abused their authority. They violated procedure, and they betrayed the trust of this city. A collective inhale from the press line. He continued. The woman they profiled was not simply my wife. She was a citizen, a professional, a person with rights. And had she not been married to someone with rank, those rights would have been ignored. Or worse. His tone remained even, but there was something in his eyes, something brittle, burning under control. This is not about one incident. This is about a pattern we've pretended not to see, and that ends now. He unfolded a sheet of paper but never looked down. The words were already carved into him. Effective immediately, the following changes are being implemented citywide within the Asheville Police Department. The reporters straightened. Pens froze mid-air. Live streams jumped by the thousands. 1. A full independent investigation into last night's misconduct has been ordered. It will be conducted by an external civilian review board, free from departmental influence. Every finding will be made public. Click, click, click. Cameras flared. 2. Body-worn cameras are now mandatory for all patrol officers, no exceptions. Footage will be reviewed monthly, with random audits conducted by the city's ethics office. A low murmur moved through the crowd. Agreement, shock, vindication. Hard to tell. 3. Effective today, no officer may stop a civilian vehicle without articulable, documented, reasonable suspicion. Traffic stops without cause are not law enforcement, they are harassment. A woman in the back quietly applauded. It didn't spread. Not yet. But it landed. 4. I am establishing a permanent Citizens Oversight Committee. This committee will have real authority to review complaints, demand answers, and recommend disciplinary action. No more closed doors, no more waiting for someone to leak the footage. He stepped closer to the microphones now, his voice tightening. You will not have to be someone's spouse, or someone's child, or someone with a badge of your own. You will be protected because you are human, and that is enough. The crowd shifted. Some nodded. Some cried. The press did not interrupt. Not this time. Chief Monroe looked out across the sea of lenses, microphones, and silent witnesses. Then he finished. We cannot undo what happened last night. But we can make sure that when it happens again, and it will, this department no longer protects the offender. It protects the truth. He stepped back. No slogans. No spin, just silence. And then one reporter called out, Chief Monroe, do you expect backlash from your own department? He turned slightly, one eyebrow raised. I don't lead for their comfort, I lead for your safety. And with that, he walked back inside. The cameras kept rolling. The live stream kept climbing. But somewhere in the city, in living rooms and cafes, in classrooms and quiet apartments, people whispered one thing to themselves and then began to say it out loud. Something changed today. The storm had passed. But what remained was not silence. It was reckoning. The 3 suspended officers stood like shadows of themselves, their badges and weapons surrendered, their gazes fixed on the concrete beneath their boots. The crowd had grown. What started as a few curious glances had become a living wall of witnesses. Neighbors, activists, strangers, students, mothers holding strollers, men with folded arms and eyes like flint. The phones were still recording. The live stream was still live. And in the center of it all stood Chief Robert Monroe. His voice was calm. Too calm. That kind of calm you only hear from a man who's done carrying the weight of diplomacy and has chosen instead the weight of truth. He looked at the officers one by one, and then he said, "If it were your mother, your daughter, your sister, standing right here, would you accept this?" The words didn't rise. They sank. Heavy, unavoidable, human. None of the men responded. They didn't need to, because silence has a sound. And that sound, when laced with guilt, is deafening. One officer swallowed hard, another blinked fast. The youngest among them looked like he might speak, then dropped his eyes and bowed his head instead. Robert nodded slowly, as if to say, "I thought so." Then, without a word, he reached back, and Danielle Monroe took his hand. For the first time that night, she stepped forward. Not rushed, not timid, measured. Steady, the way only someone could walk when they've survived the weight of being unseen for far too long. She stood before the cameras, before the crowd, before the men who had searched her like she was a threat, and not a woman who built scholarships out of her own paycheck. Danielle took one breath, then another, and then she spoke. Her voice was soft. Not because it was weak, but because it didn't have to be loud. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," she began. "I thought my silence would be enough. That maybe, for once, the system would speak for me." She glanced back at Robert, then turned toward the officers. "But I've realized something. Silence protects no one but the ones who did the harm." The crowd held still. "So let me say this, loud enough for the next person like me to hear it." She pointed gently at the camera, at the world beyond the lens. "What happened to me happens to someone else every day. The only difference is that I had someone with a badge coming for me. Most don't." She paused, not to gather courage, but to let the truth breathe. You don't have to be the chief's wife to deserve dignity. You don't have to go viral to deserve justice. You just have to be human, and that should be enough. The words didn't spark an explosion. They didn't need to. Because what came next was stronger than shouting. It was awakening. Somewhere behind the camera, someone whispered, "Say that again." Danielle didn't. She didn't need to. Because by then her words had already found their way into the screens, into the living rooms, into the hearts of people who thought maybe I should speak up too. She reached for Robert's hand again, and as they turned to walk back to their car, past the cameras, the onlookers, the dismantled illusion of untouchable authority, one young black girl in the crowd said to her mother, "That's who I want to be." And her mother whispered back, "Then remember this night." The crowd had begun to thin. Some drifted home, still clutching phones, their fingers scrolling through comment sections now teeming with fire and purpose. Others lingered on the sidewalk, eyes heavy with thought, unwilling to let the moment end just yet. But the cameras were still rolling. Danielle Monroe stood in the center of it all. No lights, no teleprompter, no stage. Just her. Her heels sank slightly into the soft earth beneath the curb. The air had cooled, and strands of her hair shifted gently in the breeze. The sky above Asheville began to pale at the edges, hinting at morning. And then someone, a woman behind a live stream, whispered, just loud enough, "Say something to the people still watching." Danielle looked at her, then into the camera lens. And it was as if she could see through it, into 1,000 living rooms, into the minds of women who had swallowed indignity for decades, into the eyes of fathers who'd taught their sons how to survive being wrongly accused, into the hearts of children who didn't yet have the words for what they'd felt their whole lives. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She just spoke. And the world stopped to listen. If you've ever been like me, profiled, dismissed, searched, silenced, don't stay quiet, because silence doesn't protect you. It protects the one who harmed you. The crowd went still again. Danielle's eyes never left the lens. Tell your story. Tell it even if your voice shakes. Even if they tell you it's not that serious. Even if they try to make you feel small. A pause. Then the words that would echo across the internet within hours. Your story is not a complaint. It's a mirror. And if enough of us hold that mirror up, they won't be able to look away. A young boy standing in the front row, maybe 12 years old, took a slow step closer to his mother and whispered, "She means me too, right?" His mother knelt, kissed his forehead, and answered, "Yes, baby. She means you most of all." Danielle closed her eyes for a beat. The crowd could see it, her holding back the tears, not from fear, but from the weight of truth finally spoken aloud. And then, this was never just about me. This was never just about Robert. It's about everyone who walks into a room and gets treated like a threat. Everyone who gets pulled over and wonders if they'll make it home. Everyone who's ever had to justify their presence in their own country, their own neighborhood, their own body. She exhaled slowly and ended with the line that would become printed on signs, replayed in classrooms, quoted on late-night shows, carved into the side of protests across America. What happened tonight wasn't the beginning of something. It was proof that we've had enough, and now we're not going to whisper about it anymore. She turned away from the camera. Not to hide, but to walk forward, because the story didn't end here. It had only just begun. If this story resonates with you, don't let it stop here. Share this video. Let someone out there know they're not alone. Leave a comment. Your voice could be the beginning of change. And subscribe. We'll keep telling the stories society wants to forget. Because justice doesn't begin in the boardroom, it begins when you decide to stop being silent.